Chinedu Okafor was a man on the run, not from the law, but from the shadows of his past. Born into a once prominent athletic family in Enugu, Nigeria, he had inherited not just his father's talent, but also the burden of a tainted legacy. His father, a celebrated sprinter, had fallen from grace after being embroiled in a doping scandal that rocked the sports world. It wasn't just the fall from public favor that haunted Chinedu. It was the legacy of betrayal, not only to his father's supporters, but also to his family's honor. Determined to redeem his family's name, Chinedu embraced his own gift for speed, pushing his body and mind to the breaking point. Every run was a battle, not just against his competitors, but against the ghosts of his father's failure. But even as his victories mounted, whispers of his father's disgrace followed him like a curse. In his early 20s, Chinedu was on the brink of stardom, but he carried the weight of knowing that one misstep could drag him back into the abyss from which he was clawing his way out. When he received an invitation to compete in an international athletic meet in Windhoek, Namibia, it felt like fate. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. He needed distance from Nigeria, from the ghosts of his past, and from the persistent judgment that lingered in every headline. Namibia was a fresh start, a place where no one would know his father's name. It was an opportunity for him to write his own story, if he could only manage to win. The evening Chinedu arrived in Windhoek, he roamed the city aimlessly, his mind heavy with the anticipation of the upcoming competition. The air was crisp and dry, the city unfamiliar but soothing in its strangeness. Walking through the streets, he found himself drawn to a small, warmly lit restaurant nestled at the corner of a quiet street. Inside, the atmosphere was intimate, the walls adorned with tapestries of Namibia's breathtaking landscapes. As he sat down, his gaze was inevitably drawn to a striking woman sitting alone by the window. Her skin seemed to glow in the soft light, her long hair cascading down her shoulders like the windswept dunes of the Namibian Desert. She was regal, her presence commanding without effort. This was Nande, princess of the Nama people and a renowned model whose beauty graced international runways. Yet, in this quiet corner of Windhoek, she seemed more human, approachable. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the weight of Chinedu's burden seemed to lift. He walked toward her, drawn as if by an invisible force. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. Nande smiled, a knowing smile that seemed to see through to his very soul. "Good evening," she replied, her voice smooth and confident. "Join me?" The conversation flowed effortlessly. Nande spoke of her life in the public eye and the struggles of balancing her duties as a princess with the pressures of a modeling career. Chinedu opened up about his past, the shadow of his father's scandal, and his drive to rebuild his family's name. With each shared word, their connection deepened, the chemistry between them undeniable. By the time they parted ways that evening, both knew their lives had changed. Something had sparked, something powerful. But there was a storm brewing beneath the surface of this new, fragile bond, one that neither could yet see. In the days and weeks that followed, Chinedu and Nande's relationship blossomed in secret. Together, they explored the deserts of Namibia, where the sun-bleached landscapes mirrored the stark simplicity of their emotions, raw and beautiful. They visited Sossusvlei, where the towering sand dunes seemed to rise endlessly, and Dedvlei, where ancient trees stood frozen in time, symbols of resilience. Their love grew like a desert flower, unexpected but vibrant. Yet, with each passing day, the realities of their situation began to loom larger. Nande was a princess, heir to traditions that placed her in a world of expectations far removed from the life Chinedu had known. Worse, Chief Kijinga, her father, was a man who upheld those traditions rigidly. Rumors of Nande's foreign suitor began to circulate, and Kaipoi, her cousin and the man her father had long considered her rightful match, grew increasingly suspicious. Chief Kijinga, when he learned of Chinedu's background, was incensed. He could not accept a man with a stained family history for his daughter, no matter how much he had achieved in his athletic career. Nande, torn between her family's expectations and her feelings for Chinedu, felt the walls closing in. The tension reached a tipping point as the day of the athletic meet drew near. Chinedu's entire future in Namibia, his burgeoning relationship with Nande, and even his quest for redemption hinged on his performance. If he lost, he wouldn't just fail in the eyes of the world, he would fail himself. His confidence had become brittle, strained by the whispers about his father and the growing pressure of his relationship with Nande. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. Losing meant more than returning to Nigeria in defeat. It meant letting go of the one place where he had begun to find peace. It meant leaving Nande, knowing he hadn't fought hard enough, and accepting that his father's legacy would forever define him. But if he could win, if he could take victory in this meet, he would be an instant sensation. His name would rise above the whispers of the past, and he would secure his place in the world, both in Namibia and in Nande's heart. Chinedu couldn't afford to lose. Not this time. The pressure was suffocating, and he could feel it creeping into his bones like cold desert winds at night. As the race day approached, Kaipoi's jealousy festered like a wound. He had harbored feelings for Nande for years, and seeing her with Chinedu was more than he could bear. It didn't help that Chinedu's presence had already begun to stir excitement in Windhoek. People were starting to notice him, and Kaipoi knew that if Chinedu won this race, he would be untouchable. Kaipoi took matters into his own hands, confronting Chinedu with thinly veiled threats. "You should leave," he hissed one evening after a practice run, "before things get worse for you here. Nande is not meant for a man like you." Chinedu ignored him, but the seed of doubt was planted. Kaipoi wasn't the only one watching closely. The village elders, Nande's father, the people of Namibia, they were all waiting to see what he would do. To make matters worse, an anonymous letter arrived the night before the meet. It threatened to expose Chinedu's relationship with Nande and dredge up every sordid detail of his father's scandal if he didn't back out of the competition. Chinedu's mind raced, fear clawing at him. This was his father's disgrace all over again. But this time, it would destroy not only him, but Nande as well. Chinedu didn't sleep that night. He knew Kaipoi was behind the letter, but he didn't know how deep the scheme ran or how far it could go. For the first time since arriving in Namibia, doubt gnawed at him. Maybe it would be easier to leave, quietly, without a fight. His father had fought and lost. Perhaps the same fate awaited him. But just before dawn, as the first light of the Namibian sun broke over the horizon, Chinedu made a decision. He would not run. He had spent too much of his life running, from his past, from his father's mistakes, from the expectations of others. This time, he would stand and fight. He wouldn't be crushed under the weight of old ghosts. He would write his own story. Nande, sensing the battle raging within him, found him by the window of their shared room. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch steady and strong. "We'll face this together," she whispered. Chinedu nodded, feeling her strength seep into him. No matter what happened tomorrow, he would fight. He had something worth fighting for. The stadium in Windhoek was alive with anticipation. The meet had drawn spectators from all over Namibia and even beyond. Chinedu's competitors were seasoned athletes, men who had been training their entire lives for moments like this. But none of them carried the weight that Chinedu did. As he stood at the starting line, every muscle in his body was taut with tension. His thoughts raced as fast as his heart, the memory of the letter still fresh in his mind. If he failed today, it wouldn't just be his loss. It would be the loss of his future with Nande, his chance at redemption, and his opportunity to shake off the stain of his father's disgrace. The starter gun echoed through the stadium, and Chinedu surged forward, his feet pounding the track like thunderclaps. Every step was a battle, against the weight of his past, the expectations of the crowd, and the threat of Kaipoi's schemes. But he ran with a singular focus, his body cutting through the air like a spear thrown with precision. The race was close, every second feeling like a lifetime. Chinedu could feel his competitors at his heels, but he pushed harder, drawing on reserves of strength he hadn't known he possessed. He wasn't just running for himself anymore. He was running for his father, for Nande, and for the future they could build together. As he crossed the finish line, the roar of the crowd washed over him, but it was the look in Nande's eyes that mattered most. She stood at the edge of the track, her face lit with pride and relief. He had won, not just the race but the battle against his own doubts. With his victory, Chinedu became an instant sensation. The media hailed him as a hero, the man who had outrun his father's scandal and claimed his own place in the spotlight. But Kaipoi wasn't finished. In a last-ditch effort to drive a wedge between Chinedu and Nande, he leaked the letter to the press, painting Chinedu as a manipulator who had used his relationship with Nande to secure favor in the competition. The scandal rocked Windhoek, and the whispers of betrayal grew louder. Chinedu found himself once again on the defensive, his victory tainted by the same kind of rumors that had haunted his father. Nande stood by him, but the pressure was immense. Chief Kijinga demanded answers, and even Nande's trust in him began to waver. Chinedu faced a choice: confront Kaipoi and expose the truth, or walk away from everything he had fought for to protect Nande from the fallout. The world was watching, waiting for him to stumble. But Chinedu knew that this was his moment of truth. He called a press conference and, with Nande by his side, laid everything bare. He spoke of his father's fall from grace, the weight of living in his shadow, and the lengths Kaipoi had gone to sabotage him. But most importantly, he spoke of love, the love he had found in Namibia, the love that had given him the strength to keep fighting. It was a gamble, but it paid off. The press turned on Kaipoi, and Chief Kijinga, though initially reluctant, saw the sincerity in Chinedu's words. The truth had set him free. In the end, Chinedu and Nande's love triumphed over the forces that had tried to tear them apart. The scandal faded, Kaipoi was sent into exile, and Chief Kijinga gave his blessing to their union. The ghosts of Chinedu's past no longer haunted him. He had outrun them, not by fleeing, but by facing them head-on. The Namibian Desert, once a place of uncertainty and danger, became the backdrop to their love story, one built on trust, resilience, and the power of redemption. Together, Chinedu and Nande forged a new path, one that honored both their pasts and their futures. And as they stood hand in hand on the dunes of Sossusvlei, watching the sun set over the vast, endless horizon, they knew they had found something that could never be broken. The sun hung low over the Namibian Desert, casting long shadows across the dunes as Chinedu and Nande stood side by side, their silhouettes intertwined against the vast, orange sky. The trials they had faced were behind them now, but the future still shimmered with uncertainty. Though Chief Kijinga had granted his blessing, Chinedu knew that winning over the Nama people, Nande's people, would be a different challenge altogether. It was not just a matter of love, it was about belonging. Despite his victory, despite the press conference that had cleared his name, Chinedu was still seen by many as an outsider, both in Namibia and in his own mind. Could a Nigerian man truly find a place here, in the heart of a culture so different from his own? Could he prove worthy not just of Nande's love, but of the people who looked to her as their future leader? Are you ready for this? Nande asked softly, her fingers brushing against his arm as they watched the sun sink further behind the dunes. There was a vulnerability in her voice that surprised him. She had always been the strong one, the confident one. Yet here she was, asking the very question that had been swirling in his own heart. I don't know, Chinedu admitted, his voice barely more than a whisper. But I've learned something. Every time I've run away, things got worse. Now I'm ready to stay. Whatever comes, I'll face it. Nande smiled at his words, but there was a sadness in her eyes. We've won so many battles already, but there is still more to come. The elders expect a lot from me. My duties, my responsibilities. Marrying someone outside our people, especially someone with a past like yours. Not everyone will be on our side. Chinedu took her hand, holding it tightly. Let them say what they want. We've come this far, haven't we? They both knew that this was just the beginning. As the weeks turned into months, the winds of change began to stir in the heart of the Nama community. While some had embraced Chinedu, recognizing his determination and the love he shared with Nande, others remained skeptical. The old ways held strong sway over many of the elders, and they viewed Chinedu as a disruption, a man who represented the blurring of lines between tradition and modernity. Chief Kijinga, though he had given his blessing, found himself caught in the crossfire of conflicting expectations. As a father, he wanted his daughter's happiness, but as a leader, he was bound to the ancient traditions of his people. Among the most vocal opponents of Chinedu and Nande's relationship was Amako, the eldest of the Nama Council, who represented the conservative faction. Amako had always been a traditionalist, and to him, Chinedu's presence threatened the very fabric of the tribe's identity. His voice carried weight, and slowly, he began to row, "The people will not follow a leader who has turned her back on her heritage," Amako warned one evening during a heated council meeting. "How can we trust a future built with foreign hands?" Chief Kijinga remained silent, his face a mask of unreadable emotion. The old ways mattered, yes, but so did the future. He watched his daughter from across the room, saw the fire in her eyes as she prepared to speak. "My heritage is part of who I am," Nande said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "But the world is changing, Amako, and we cannot remain isolated forever. We must embrace the future without abandoning our past." Amako's eyes narrowed, but he did not speak again. The room was silent, the tension thick as the desert heat at midday. The conflict between tradition and change simmered beneath the surface, but the storm truly broke when news of Nande's and Chinedu's engagement spread through the villages. It should have been a moment of celebration, a unifying event for the community, but instead, it exposed deep fractures within the tribe. A small but vocal group, led by Amako, began to openly challenge Nande's leadership. They whispered that her judgment had been compromised by her love for a foreigner, that she was leading the Nama people down a path of ruin. These dissenting voices grew louder with each passing day, fanning the flames of unrest. One night, as Chinedu and Nande sat together under the stars, Nande shared her growing concerns. "Things are getting worse," she said quietly, leaning against his shoulder. "Amako's influence is spreading. If he convinces enough of the elders, I could lose my claim to leadership." Chinedu tightened his hold on her, the weight of her words heavy on his heart. "Then we fight," he said simply. "We've come too far to let him tear us apart now." But Nande knew that the battle ahead would not be fought with words or fists. It was a battle for the hearts and minds of her people, a delicate, dangerous game that could determine the future of their love, their community, and even their lives. As tensions escalated, Nande and Chinedu decided to embark on a journey across the Nama villages, hoping to connect with the people directly. They knew that Amako's influence could not be countered with political speeches or grand gestures. They needed to show the people who they really were, two individuals, deeply in love and committed to the future of the tribe. The journey was grueling, taking them deep into the heart of the Namibian wilderness. Together, they visited villages where the elders had never even met Chinedu, speaking to communities that felt disconnected from the capital's politics. At first, the reception was cold, with many reluctant to engage. But over time, as they listened to the concerns of the people and shared their own vision for the future, something began to shift. One evening, after a long day of traveling, they found themselves in a remote village near the Skeleton Coast. The village elder, a wizened man named Garoeb, had watched their approach with a careful eye. He had heard the whispers about Amako's discontent, but had yet to make up his mind. As they sat around a fire that night, Chinedu spoke from the heart. "I didn't come here to take anything from you," he said, his voice low but steady. "I came because I love your princess. I came because I believe in the future she wants to build for her people. I know I'm not one of you by birth, but I want to be part of your story. I want to help build a future where the Nama people can thrive, not just in tradition, but in the modern world." There was a long pause, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Garoeb finally spoke, his voice raspy but full of wisdom. "You speak well, young man, but love alone cannot hold up the weight of a people's future. You must prove your loyalty, not just to Nande, but to us." Chinedu nodded, understanding the gravity of the elder's words. He would have to earn their trust, not just with words, but with actions. Word spread quickly that Chinedu had been challenged to prove his loyalty to the Nama people. The trial set before him was an ancient one, known as the Trial of the Ancestors, a series of tasks designed to test a person's endurance, wisdom, and connection to the land. It was a rite of passage that few outsiders had ever undergone, let alone completed. The trial began at dawn, in the shadow of the great mountains that bordered the desert. Chinedu was tasked with gathering sacred stones from a hidden cave deep within the treacherous terrain of Fish River Canyon. The path was perilous, the heat of the desert unrelenting. But Chinedu moved forward, each step fueled by his desire to prove himself, not just for Nande, but for the people who had opened their hearts to him. Days passed as he made his way through the canyon, his body pushed to the brink of exhaustion. At night, he slept under the stars, the weight of the journey heavy on his mind. But as he neared the cave, something extraordinary happened. A sudden, fierce storm swept through the canyon, a rare event in the desert. The winds howled and the sky darkened, but Chinedu pressed on, refusing to turn back. Finally, he reached the sacred cave, where he found the stones, smooth and luminous, each one representing the spirit of an ancestor. As he gathered them into his hands, a sense of peace washed over him. This was more than a trial of endurance. It was a spiritual journey, a test of his connection to the land and the people. When Chinedu returned to the village, battered but triumphant, the people greeted him with awe. He had passed the trial, not just by surviving the physical challenges, but by proving his resilience and dedication. Even Amako, though begrudgingly, could not deny that Chinedu had earned his place among them. Chinedu's successful completion of the trial marked a turning point for both him and Nande. The resistance they had faced began to melt away, and the people slowly embraced the idea of a future led by Nande, with Chinedu by her side. Even Amako, though still wary, stepped back from his opposition, recognizing that the winds of change were inevitable.